Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa with me, Jean-Emile Jameen, taking you through all the latest headlines from the continent. Coming up on the show, in a scathing report, Human Rights Watch says Burkina Faso's government forces and jihadists together killed more than 1,800 civilians between 2023 and 2025. The study accuses both sides of war crimes, including mass killings, ethnic targeting, and widespread repression, with over 2 million people displaced. Then a collapsed, unfinished school in Accra kills 4 people and injures nearly 30 this week, raising concerns over unsafe classrooms. Ghana's Education Ministry halts classes in affected areas and launches a nationwide audit with plans to build over 400 safer schools. Then just outside Brussels, the Royal Museum for Central Africa stores old mining maps showing where important minerals like cobalt, lithium and tungsten are found. An American company backed by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos now wants to use AI to help uncover them, but Belgian authorities are not giving up exclusive access that easily. Welcome to Eye on Africa. We begin this edition in Burkina Faso, where Human Rights Watch today has released a damning report showing that government forces have killed more than twice as many civilians as jihadist groups over the past 2 years. The study, titled "None Can Run Away," accuses both sides, including the military, its civilian auxiliaries and the Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM, of war crimes and crimes against humanity. It highlights mass killings, ethnic targeting and widespread displacement across the country. Joining me now in studio to go over the report is one of the contributing authors, Jean-Baptiste Galopin. He's also the senior advisor in the Crisis, Conflict and Arms Division of the Human Rights Watch. Thank you so much for joining me, Jean-Baptiste.
Thank you. Good evening.
The main report's findings, just take us through them briefly.
So this report is the fruit of a year and a half of research in very challenging circumstances. The government of Burkina has censored any independent reporting and expelled foreign journalists and created a climate of fear and paranoia in the country. So what's happening in Burkina has really been shrouded behind that veil of repression. And what we found was that actually the conflict in Burkina is probably one of the world's worst conflict at the moment, with civilians being placed at the center of the conflict and both sides deliberately targeting civilians on a large scale. We documented 57 incidents of attacks against civilians by both sides that led to the death of 1,800 civilians. 2/3 of them were killed by government forces and their allied militias.
2/3 of them killed by government forces. And these are the people who are supposed to be protecting these civilians. Just take me through the methodology, because if you say that it is very difficult to uncover this and the media channels are all closed, surely that makes finding out and getting these testimonies as difficult as anything can be.
Yes, and we try to document incidents systematically, meaning identify witnesses for the key incidents we heard about and document them systematically. But nevertheless, it's a very challenging environment. So we had to travel to neighboring countries and speak with people who'd been displaced in attacks, and as well as over the phone. And we complemented this with a kind of a systematic analysis of posts on the social medias of JNIM, the Islamist armed group, as well as the government's TV and radio channel. We used AI to analyze this content and place specific individuals, specific units at the sites of attacks. And I want to say that there is something really that happened since the current junta took power in September 2022. The government of Traoré, announced the mass recruitment of militias, and these recruitment processes actually, exacerbated the targeting of civilians because communities that refused to join these militias were targeted by the government. Those where the recruitment took place got targeted by the JNIM, the armed group. And we saw this tit-for-tat pattern of attacks and retaliation targeting civilians really lead to a massive increase in violence since the current junta took power.
And we're thinking of those examples, February 25, 2024, that was in Nondin and Soro villages, 233 civilians killed. That's included 56 children. There was also Barsalogo in the attack, which killed 133, many civilians. Who are we holding to account right now, and what recommendations have you made?
These abuses are taking place in a context of total impunity for perpetrators on both sides. The authorities' discourse is that they want to neutralize the terrorists, meaning kill them. So they don't bother taking prisoners. Meanwhile, the government forces are facing complete impunity for their crimes because these crimes are carried out in the context of coordinated attacks involving the military and the militias. Now, what we're calling for is for the International Criminal Court to open a preliminary investigation into these crimes, and for states and countries that have applied the principle of universal jurisdiction to hold perpetrators to account on their soil when they can.
Does that include Ibrahim Traore?
Yes, I mean, we did a very systematic analysis of the chain of command for these crimes, and as I mentioned, we found that the worst crimes were actually carried out in coordinated operations between the military and the VDPs. We've seen in particular that these targeted communities living in areas controlled by the regime, and especially targeting the Fulani population, which is the second largest ethnic group in Burkina Faso. Now, we concluded that this targeting of Fulani amounts to ethnic cleansing, and that this policy of ethnic cleansing really expresses the views of the president, who spoke with Fulani leaders in a meeting in 2023, and according to witnesses who attended that meeting, he demanded that Fulani communities distantiate themselves from the regime, and he did so in threatening terms, saying, if you don't do this, we'll send all our forces, and it'll be death. So very clear threats coming from all the way at the top.
What would you say to supporters of Ibrahim Traore who would say that this is just Western propaganda, a smear campaign, baseless, meant to destabilize Burkina Faso and the gains that they've made? What would you say to them?
What we hope is that our report will lift the veil on these abuses. The government's been very successful domestically at hiding the reality of what is happening in the country by expelling foreign journalists and repressing dissidents. We've documented cases where even magistrates who were investigating crimes committed against Burkinabe civilians ended up forcibly enrolled in the military to fight against the regime as a way of punishing them. So there is this extremely coercive environment. We are hoping that our report will show supporters of the government the reality of what is happening in the country. And what is happening, shows that the government is failing even in its own terms, because actually, even though the violence against civilians has massively increased, we also see that the regime is continuously expanding its control over Burkinabe territory.
On that note, we end this. Jean-Baptiste Galopin, thank you so much for your views, and also one of the authors of that report now from Human Rights Watch, just underscoring the violence that has taken place against civilians in Burkina Faso. Let's move on to Ghana, where schools have been suspended in Accra after an unfinished school building collapse on the weekend tragically killed 4 children and injured around 30 others. It marks the 4th major structural accident in the country in 6 months, prompting authorities to ban all classes in incomplete school buildings, with a call to revise building standards. Our Ghana correspondent Justice Baidu has more on the story.
The building at the center of this collapse that killed 4 and injured nearly 30 persons was an uncompleted school structure that had been abandoned since 2012. This fresh accident has brought to the fore the issue of classroom safety in Ghana. Actual figures of schools that are currently being run in uncompleted structures and under trees are unknown, but education sector analysts say that could be running into around 5,000. Now, with pressure mounting from the public after this incident, the Education Ministry says it is causing an audit into the actual numbers whilst it moves to build new classrooms.
Government dedicated substantial amount of money to build over 400 schools. Each district is supposed to build about 4 schools. All these put together are measures that are being put in place by the ministry to ensure that our classrooms are safe enough and conducive for learning.
Building engineering consultants that I have spoken with in the aftermath of this accident have raised concern about the high level number of structures like this in Ghana that are now at risk of collapse due to poor adherence to building integrity and lack of oversight from local government institutions in the way that buildings are put up in Ghana.
Just a few kilometers from Brussels, the cellars of the Royal Museum for Central Africa hold one of the world's most valuable mining archives. Colonial era maps and surveys had previously detailed minerals like cobalt, lithium, coltan, and tungsten, essential for the digital and energy transition. Now, a battle over digitization is unfolding, with these documents literally worth their weight in gold. Cobalt Metals, an American company backed by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, is now looking to artificial intelligence in order to locate new deposits faster, many of them in the African continent.
Deep within this museum near Brussels lies a potential treasure trove that has been largely untapped until now. Hundreds of meters of archives dating back to the colonial era. These include maps created by Belgian mining companies.
It's a fairly detailed map. It's very well done. And we're talking about an area where tin is found.
Tin and also lithium and cobalt, critical metals that were not widely sought after at the time, but have since become central to the global economy. As a result, these documents have whetted the appetite of Cobalt Metals, an American company that uses artificial intelligence to find untapped deposits.
It's inevitable that the private sector will be interested in these archives, but our priority is to make them available to the public sector.
The museum wants to digitize these archives itself, but last year, Cobalt Metals reached an agreement with the Democratic Republic of Congo to handle it directly. This is something the Belgian authorities are refusing.
These archives belong to the Belgian state, which has a collaboration agreement with the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we digitize them and transfer them there, and the country then decides how to use them.
The museum has hired about 10 people who will be dedicated solely to the digitization process. This project could take several years because, before this stage, the data needs to be inventoried and some documents damaged by time need to be restored.
We will probably have to call on external expertise to massively digitize all this information. But that's not the same as entrusting it to a company active in the mining sector that digitizes for its own purposes.
The data is coveted because the exploitation of other minerals during the colonial period provides valuable clues about the presence of lithium.
The lithium is contained in this white mineral, the long-bladed white minerals called spodumene. But these rocks were initially mined for tin for a long time. But basically, where you find tin, you might find lithium.
These archives have found themselves unwittingly at the heart of a major geopolitical issue. The DRC is home to one of the world's largest untapped lithium deposits.
That's where we end this edition of Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up on France 24.
In 1946, Moldova was ravaged by famine.
In public, nobody spoke of the famine. The word was strictly forbidden.
Casele erau pline cu morți. Dar mă uitam la ei și mi se rupea inima deja.
Did the Soviet Union deliberately starve its own people?
There was a drought, no rain. That's why there was a famine. It wasn't the drought that caused the famine, it was the Russians. They took whatever we had in our attics.
One of the witnesses I spoke to described the area to me as a concentration camp without gas chambers.
80 years later, the Great Moldovan Famine revisited.